What's up, guys? This is Adam Kloffenstein with the Toronto Blue Jays, and you're listening to The Walk-Off with Scott Belford and Adam Mack.
So thrilled to be joined right now by pitcher for the Toronto Blue Jays, Adam Kloffenstein. Welcome to The Walk-Off, man. Thanks so much for joining us.
Hi, thank you guys for having me.
Yeah, buddy. First off, congrats on being one of the non-roster invitees to Big League Camp, man. Good for you.
Yeah, I appreciate it. It was a little bit of a, wouldn't say I was surprised necessarily, but definitely was a cool phone call for sure.
That's a humble answer. You're like, I'm humble but confident.
That's the way I try to go usually.
Yeah.
I feel like that's a good route.
It's a great route, man. I know you're only a week in right now. How's the first week of spring training been?
It's been great. It's obviously, I'm sure you guys know about the new facility. It's been a blast. Just day in and day out being around, just like kind of casually just being around, Springer, Ryu, Pearson, these guys that, are some of the best in the game, and, Marcus Semien, and, also the best coaching staff that the Blue Jays have to offer, and the best other staff with the trainers and nutritionists and all that. It's been a lot of fun.
What has the dynamic been like with the big leaguers? Like, have they been treating you and the rest of the minor league crew well?
Yeah, there's a lot of there's a lot of separation, I would say, even more so with COVID.
Right.
We have 4 locker rooms, and we've had them all used right now. There's only like 30 guys, only 20 something guys are allowed in the big league locker room. So there's plenty of big leaguers that aren't even in the big league locker room because of separation and all that. I didn't get to be one of those guys to be in the big league locker room. So they've got us all split up in different locker rooms, and there are 3 locker rooms, or there's 2 locker rooms across from the weight room, and the weight room's in the middle, and the big league locker room's across. So we don't really see those guys unless we're all doing something. Obviously, all of our lifts and everything are all together. But the weight room's big enough to where the weight room's almost split up without being split up, if you know what I'm saying.
Yeah.
There's as I get to learn more and more every day, there's a ton of unwritten rules and a ton of things that, it's all about feel, and it's all about,
What are some of the unwritten rules?
It's, there's just certain things that, we have a massage therapist, and, I don't go in there and get massages, that's more for the big, higher end guys. If there's 2 people, waiting to work with the trainer, and one of them's George Springer and one of them's you, a non-roster.
Right.
Even if George Springer wasn't there first, he's probably going next.
Right.
Parking, you don't park up close to the building. You let them park close to the building.
So the $150 million man gets a nicer parking spot than you.
Yes, he does. Then, when it comes to some of the other things, that there's really not, when it comes to actual playing, there's not a ton of things that I've noticed yet that are like super, obviously, you kind of let those guys dictate really what they want to do. But when it comes to the weight room, when it comes to certain things, we just have it's such an awesome facility, and there's so many resources that it's like we have so many of everything that we don't need. Like, if somebody's using a certain dumbbell, like the 60-pound dumbbell, we have 12 60-pound dumbbells. So like, it's not really a big deal on,
You just go get another one. Right.
Right. But yeah, there's, like, you don't talk to guys while they're lifting, you don't really, stay out of their way when they're doing things. So a lot of it's pretty common sense.
Right.
Some of the other stuff, you just like anything else in life, you have to do it and get a talk about it, and then learn your lesson, kind of thing. But yeah, it's cool. And, a lot of those guys have been really welcoming, to to the guys that have come in as far as I've seen. I also know quite a few of them, at least like on the surface. I know quite a few of them just to see them. We could say what's up to each other. And, I actually ran into quite a few of those guys down in a camp that I went to in November. And obviously quite a few of them are pretty young. So they're not at that point where they're like 8-year veterans and they're like too good for minor league. Like they were just in the minor leagues 2 or 3 years ago. So it's a pretty young group. And I do think that this group is I think it's very driven on one thing. And I don't think there's a ton of selfishness. Obviously, I'm not going to sit here and tell you that there's not, some guy thinking he's better than another guy and stuff like that. There's a lot of competition that goes on. We have a lot of talent, and we have a lot of young talent, and we have a lot of talent that's moving kind of at the same pace, and they can't all get there at the same time.
Right.
There's not enough room. So, and that's not a secret, so I think that there's some internal competition that goes on, and which is fantastic for the game. I think that, it's healthy competition, and, who wants to go there and make it up to the big leagues and have nobody there to challenge them? You know what I mean? So I think that, we could end up this year, we might have a guy hitting 5 or 6 hole that would be the cleanup hitter on another team, and we might have a guy that's the third starter that would be the first or second starter on another team. But that's how you win is having, teams like that. So we from what I've seen, it's a really great culture. A lot of the guys have been great. I've met and talked to George quite a bit. He's coming from Houston. I'm from Houston.
Yeah.
So we kind of have that in common. And it's just one of those guys that I want to pick his brain. I want to see what he sees when he gets in the box. I want to know when out of all the the laundry list of pitcher, Hall of Fame pitchers that he's faced, I want to know, what he sees and what makes them harder or easier to hit. What pitches can he see better than others? I want to know all that kind of stuff. And so that's why I kind of built in a relationship with some of those guys. Plus, I plan on being teammates with those guys in the near future. So I think that, starting when you walk into the clubhouse on your major league debut, you want to know everybody already.
Yeah.
You don't want to walk in like, you already got enough stuff on your plate. You don't need to walk like you act like you're walking into a new job that you don't know anybody. So I think that, a lot of good relationships being made, and, obviously with this new facility and kind of getting back to baseball, so to speak, there's a positive aura around the facility in general, just from new facility, couple new big star players that the Blue Jays aren't used to having, that the Blue Jays it's not normal for the Blue Jays to go out and pay guys like that. No. So I think that in the new facility and the other new things that I think are the players and everyone in the building can kind of feel the organization shifting a little bit into that kind of like chasing a ring kind of atmosphere. And I think that it's really cool. And it's an energy that I think a lot of the players and, the staff alike, I think they feed off of. I think the security guys feel it. I mean, I think everybody kind of sees what's coming, and, it's not hard to see it. And, it's not hard to look at. I think out of our top, 15 pitching prospects or whatever it is, I think the average height is like 6'3". It's like
it is a tall pitching staff. That's true, man. Yeah.
So and a lot of guys are coming out ready. I think Pearson was up to 100 yesterday, and I watched Springer face for you, and first pitch, Springer took a hack that if he barreled it would have landed in your backyard. And, it's just, I think that guys are ready to go, and I think that's a good sign.
And you sort of touched on it too. There must be so much transferring of information going on right now. And I love that you kind of brought up that you were into hearing what Springer had to say about your pitching and stuff. Because that was one thing when we talked to Joey Murray that he really brought up about. I know you weren't there, but he was at the alternate site. And that was one of his biggest growing experiences, right? Was that he couldn't help he couldn't stop talking to hitters. He's like, I've always picked pitchers' brains, but he's like, just being around big league hitters and hearing what they're seeing just meant so much. It must just be so prevalent right now everywhere you go, eh? Guys just like picking each other's brains.
Right. Yeah. And that was when I played in that COVID kind of league that I played in. And
I want to hear all about the Constellation Energy League.
Yeah.
Let's get into it. Yeah, buddy.
So that one, I kind of same as Joey, you know, I was facing guys that were, you know, I faced a couple guys, more than a couple guys that had got drafted before I was born. And like, there was a couple guys that had gotten drafted in like 1998, 1999, you know, stuff like that. And they had been in and out, you know, of the league. And, you know, obviously these aren't Hall of Famers, but they're guys that have been there. They're guys that have competed at the highest level in the world. And they're guys that have, you know, made plenty of money doing it. And, you know, I think that, you know, facing every hitter I faced for the most part had at least AA experience, which I still have never pitched in a full season yet. So facing, you know, I one thing I learned a lot was like, it doesn't matter who you are, how good you are, how much money you got, who your dad is, you know, all that stuff. Experience is like gold. And when you can find people that have experience, you know, I don't care if, you know, somebody's coming up to me with a doctorate from Harvard, he never played. Like I want to talk to somebody who has been in those games, who has been in a stadium with 40,000, who has pitched in the playoffs, you know, who started a game 7. You know, I want to talk to guys like that, and, you know, and talk to hitters about really when they've been up there where I want to be, when they've faced guys that are household names, what they saw in those guys that other guys don't do, what they saw in those guys that made that pitcher be able to get them out 9 times out of 10. And, you know, so I think that, you know, being around guys like that, I faced a couple of guys that grew up in the area that were, you know, I had heard their name and they were getting drafted and they were like first round picks when I was like 12, and I never imagined pitching to them, you know, and it just starts to come a little bit more real. And that's, you know, that's the same thing with, like, you know, you watch.
Let's stop for 1 second here for the listeners who don't know. So we're talking about the Constellation Energy League, which was kind of, it was 4 teams, correct? And it was kind of thrown together because there was no minor league ball to try and get some experience for you guys.
Correct.
And Roger Clemens was this was kind of his brainchild, right?
Yes. Roger Clemens was the head engine on that train.
Unreal, man. That must have been, you've met him obvly with him?
Yeah. So he was actually in my dugout for pretty much every outing I had. So him and I are, I mean, he's a really, really smart guy, good guy, really wants to, you know, he just has, I mean, I'm assuming you've come across people in your life where it's like every word that comes out of their mouth is just gold. And I think that, and you just stop what you're doing and you listen, because like I talked about with that experience component, as far as pure experience goes and performing at the highest level, as far as still living, he's about the best you have. He pitched for 24 years at the highest level, 7 Cy Youngs, has faced everybody and their brother. And, you know, I think that, you know, talking to him, he threw a bullpen for us. He's still throwing like upper 80s. Like he is just, the biggest thing to me that's always
still throwing upper 80s. My God.
Yeah, he still throws batting practice to his kids, but he throws like competitive batting practice. And he was talking about, you know, he still tries to strike his kids out, and like that competitor in him that obviously I'm a little too young to remember, but I know you remember, that competitor in him is still there. And he would get pissed off when we would lose. We were playing a round robin 28 game league. No one really won the league. Like no one really cared. And he would get mad when we would lose. He was still has that competitor side. And if not, you know, he's playing golf all over the country, you know, and getting mad when he's not playing golf well, and, you know, stuff like that. So, and the funniest part is, you know, he was still doing like his arm care and his stuff after he threw, you know. And the biggest thing that stands out to me about him, that over anything else, almost more impressive to me the Cy Youngs and all that kind of stuff is the longevity and never going under the knife. That is nowadays, if you told the Blue Jays Adam Kloffenstein is going to pitch for you for 20 years and he's not going to win one Cy Young, but he's going to be a solid 2 or 3 in the rotation starter, and he's going to give you a solid outing 9 out of 10 times, and he's going to do it for 20 years, they'd give me $300 million now, because that is what is most sought after from teams, is someone who's consistent. And that's not just when they're pitching, they're really good. That means they're consistent every day. They're consistent in everything that they do. And I would be the first to say that not going under the knife and never being really truly injured in 24 years, there has to be some luck involved in that. But
obviously,
it's just extremely impressive to me. And obviously that era that he pitched in, when you talk about Nolan Ryan and some of these guys that, Nolan Ryan's made it very clear and apparent, that he disagrees with some things that go on nowadays, and guys are soft and all that stuff, which a lot of people are soft. I agree with that. But, I think that, what those guys were able to accomplish and never being injured, I mean, it's really, really cool to see and really fun to hear what they have to say about it, because, you can hear like maybe some trainer that worked with Roger Clemens for 6 years, or, somebody that coached him for a while or whatever, and they're telling secondhand stories about Roger, but he's standing here telling me about striking out, you name it. He's talking about facing Barry Bonds. He's talking about facing Ken Griffey. He's talking about facing these guys that is just like legends. It's like you're watching a movie. It's like, and so it was really cool. And, it was a really fun experience, but kind of going back to what Joey was saying, it's a lot like that, where I was trying to be too fine at the beginning of it, because all these guys, and I wouldn't say I was necessarily intimidated. I was just going at it from a logical perspective, as these guys right now, most of them are probably, I don't know if I would put it as better than me, but they have more experience. So my stuff is nasty to a short season guy, but this guy's seen 20 of me in his career. So I'm trying to be too nasty. I'm trying to make them look stupid and fall over, rather than throwing the ball over the plate, making them hit it, letting my stuff do what it does. And I had a couple guys, kind of sit down with me after some of my outings, and they're like, "Hey man, your stuff is really good. Your stuff is," I was 19 at the time too, when I was pitching in that. And they're like, "Your stuff is something that I might see in a big league spring training game. So throw it over the plate and make it do what it does. Don't try to, you don't buy a Lamborghini and then try to make it even fat. Like, just do what your stuff does and let it play. And hitting is hard. And so just, do your thing and stop trying to be so fine. Stop trying to be cute." And that really helped me a lot. And it stayed with me because, I started having more success. I started attacking guys more. And the most important pitch in baseball is strike one. And the faster that you can get that strike one on a hitter, the better. And 0-1 to 1-0, it just is the biggest difference in the world, from a pitcher's, not even just from like numbers, just from a pitcher's mentality is, okay, I've got him 0-1. A lot of times when I get a guy 0-1, I mean, I'm like, I don't care if Mike Trout's in the box. If it's 0-1, there's blood in the water. But if it's 1-0, there's also blood in the water, but he's the shark, not me.
Right.
And so I think that, and then when the snowball effect is, and this is where I would really get messed up and where I really had to work on is, so let's just use Mike Trout as an example. You're facing Mike Trout. Odds are already not in your favor. Well, they are, but I
get what you're saying. Yes.
This is not the guy you want to be facing usually. So if you start him out 0-1, the odds are triple more in your favor. If you start him out 1-0, now you're even more worried. So then you're trying to be even cuter than you were on the first pitch, and now it's 2-0. And then you try to get fancy and you throw a breaking ball, you miss. Now it's 3-0. And now you've put one of the fastest players in baseball on first base without even giving yourself a chance. the guy, he's not Jesus Christ. You know, like if he takes you deep, make him take you deep by challenging him. If he gets a base hit, that's better than walking him. He has a base hit off a lot of guys.
Yeah.
You know, so I just, you know, I'd much rather, if he's going to go to first base, I'd rather me throw a competitive pitch that he makes it, that he does what he does and he hits, not bullshit with him. And then he ends up on first base and you're like, well, I just wasted 5 pitches on my arm that I could have just told him to go to first base if I was going to do that. So, you know,
would you say that realization is the biggest step mentally that you've taken in your game?
I would say, yeah, that just being around those guys, I've never been around that caliber of guys before in a competitive environment. So I think that it's just all part of the learning process. And, you know, I've been told for years, and I've started to see it more, like the difference between me and Justin Verlander is really not a huge difference when it comes on paper. The biggest difference is up here. And the biggest difference is experience, like I keep saying. The biggest difference is how he mentally goes at his routines, how he mentally goes at his career is different than how I go at mine. And the consistency in which he perfects his craft is a lot more than I do. That's the only difference between a Cy Young and not, is consistency. So that's where we talk about, like, on, you know, on my stuff on paper is big league ready, but it's the mental side of the game. It's 40,000 in the stands. You know, it's one of the best hitters in baseball up there with a runner at third base and not giving into him and challenging that guy. Yeah. Because, you know, that's the difference. And going into a game, having a plan, not just going into a game being like, well, I hope I don't get shelled today. You know, like that's the biggest difference that I've found between a big leaguer and a minor leaguer, or even like a high end prospect that's a young guy, you know, like somebody like me, Simeon, Grosh, some of these guys, versus someone maybe Pearson still kind of going through that. But then you know, you look at someone like Ryu. Obviously, me and Ryu don't have a ton of conversation. He doesn't speak that much English.
Yeah.
But someone like that who him letting it go is 90 miles an hour. He doesn't try to be somebody he's not. And he lets his stuff do what it does, and he challenges you with it. And if you're going to beat him, you're going to beat him with his best stuff. So when you're pitching, it's like, why would I give in to this guy? If he's going to beat me, I'm going to go at him. And if we end up having a 12 pitch at bat and he takes me deep on a 3-2 pitch, good for him. You know, I'll get him next time. But
yeah,
whenever you don't go at these guys and make them do something, don't give them something, make them have to make a decision, make them have to make a play. So I think that's one of the biggest things that I've kind of, and I've always been a confident guy, but I think I've always been more confident externally, whereas now I'm a little more, I've kind of changed that a little bit. And on the outside, I've more humbled myself. And on the inside, it's like, I'm more confident internally because I know what my capabilities are, and I know how close I am to fulfilling those. And I know how good I can be. I don't need to talk about it. I need to do it. And when you're 16, you know, it's like, I'm going to play in the big leagues, and everyone's like, yeah, we think you will, you know, you're really good and all that. But now it's here. And now I don't need to talk about it anymore. Everyone knows that I have a chance to do that. So now it's more of an internal game within the game in myself, is like, what can I do every day to make me a little more consistent? Because that's really, for me, when it comes to my stuff, you know, my stuff plays well, you know, and I've got some things to work on, like we all do, and I always will. But I think that right now I could compete in a big league game. The difference is, after the game, I would be absolutely mentally drained just from trying to come up with how I'm going to get this guy out. Because in short season and some of these other leagues that I've played in, and, you know, different things, it's like, you look at a lineup and you point at one guy and you're like, all right, that guy could beat me. I got to get that guy out. And then you mow through the rest of the lineup. In the big leagues, it's not that way. The 9-hole guy could go for 3 for 3 off your ass. So every hitter is mentally taxing. And that's how it was in the COVID league and then not to mention, it's even more taxing when you start a guy 2-0 and now you have to claw and fight to get this guy out. So I might go 2-0 on a guy. He fouls 2 balls off, fouls another ball off, and then he rolls over to third base and I get him out. But it was a 6-pitch taxing at bat. Whereas if I would have started him off 0-1, I might have got him to fly out on the second pitch. So, I think a lot of that stuff is so mental. And like I said, I really don't think you can't really work out your brain. You can't buy experience. You can't train experience.
Yeah.
So
that's interesting, man. Because I love what you're saying here, because you spend so much time developing your skills and kind of getting the tools that you need to be a big league player. And once you have it, then you're like, oh shit, now I need to conquer the mental side of this, because until I kind of accumulate that experience, I'm just flailing around a bit, right?
Right. And there's a ton of guys, I'm around them every day. And I'm from Houston. There's a ton of guys. There's so much talent out there. It's ridiculous. There's 1,500 or there's 150 starting spots in the big leagues as a pitcher. And I promise you, there's more than 150 guys in this country that have big league stuff. Yeah. They can't control it. They don't know what to do with it. They don't know how to get guys out. They don't know how to sequence. They don't know how to attack hitters. They don't know how to set up hitters. Maybe they can't fill their position. Maybe they can't stay out of trouble. There's so many things that have to come together to be one of those 150. And I think that's really what all I think about at the end of the day is I want to play on TV. I want to be the best I can be. And I want to be one of those 150. And the way that I get there, stuff wise, is there. All of my pitches rank at least average or better in the big leagues right now. So in my velo, I've been up to 99. There's not a ton more that I'm going to get out of myself physically. The biggest difference is how am I going to get my mind, especially at a younger age, even if I don't even want to put this out there, but even if I didn't debut for another 3 years, that's still 23. That's still super young to be in the big leagues. So I think that I'm trying to get my mind. I want my mind to be as close to a guy like Verlander, Kershaw, Scherzer, Cole, a mind like that as young as I can get. Yeah. As early in my career as I can get to that point, the more my grandkids won't have to worry about their college. You know what I mean? So like the more that I can, the faster that I can get that mindset. And that's why, I'll do part of my work every day is just talking to people, just really getting to, and I'm going to be real honest with you. I don't go up and talk to our second string center fielder. I want to talk to the guys that play. I want to talk to the guys that make the money. I want to talk to the guys that are most successful, because that's like, if you wanted to buy a house, you wouldn't go talk to someone who's in real estate school. Like you're going to go talk to a realtor. Yeah. And so if I'm going to buy a car, if I'm going to buy a Ford, I'm not going to talk to someone who works at Honda. Like I want to talk to the people that are putting in the work day in and day out, that are more consistent than me. And so, and like Joey is right. It's talking to pitchers isn't really going to help you a whole lot, because what works for other pitchers might not work for you. But there's plenty of things that another pitcher can tell you, and you're like, well, I never really thought about it that way, and it might change your career. Right. But just a different perspective. You're gonna get something from every hitter that you can work with. And even if and that's another thing that I learned is like, even if someone's telling you something negative, like even if someone comes up to you or you're asking them about a hitter or a pitcher that they just faced, and I'm like, what did you see there? And they start dogging this pitcher, and they're like, his fastball wasn't that good. He was tipping his pitches. I could see what he was throwing. I'm like, okay, well, what was he doing that was tipping his pitches? And then he tells me what he was doing, so I know I can't do that. So it's just, it doesn't always have to be a super positive outlook. Pretty much anything that they tell you can help you.
Right.
Because
just accumulating knowledge.
Right. You're just accumulating that stuff. And to be honest with you, 75% of it you don't use, but it's that 25% that you pull out from all these different places that can get you there. And I think that, I've been blessed with the size and the ability and the talent and all those great things, but been told since I was a kid, it doesn't mean shit if you can't put it on paper. If you can't put it into work, it doesn't mean, it's kind of like you go to the grocery store and you see a guy that's 6'8" and you're like, hey, did you play basketball? And he's like, no. Like, well, why not? It's not everybody has what it takes.
Yeah.
And I think that the minor leagues is an interesting place that most other sports don't have. And that's where you really weed out the ones that have it and the ones that don't, because everyone that's there has a talent of some sort to be a professional baseball player. So it's like, well, what's the difference between Bo Bichette and a guy that never made it to low A? And it might not, first of all, like, I'm really good friends with Jordan Groshans, and that kid is blessed to hit a baseball. God put him here to make to hit a baseball. And that there's just no way around that he can hit a baseball. Like, if I could go find a 13-year-old from a high school out here and he could work 7 days a week for 10 years and he still won't hit a baseball like Jordan Groshans does. Some guys are meant to do that. But you might have a guy that was really highly touted out of high school, and then you've got Bo Bichette. Bo Bichette's in the league at 21, and this other guy is still bebopping through low A at 22, 23. And you're like, well, what's wrong with this guy? He just doesn't have it. He just doesn't have it mentally. And I think, his ability is there. His ability hasn't gone anywhere. He just doesn't have the mental strength, and it comes off the field, almost more off the field than on the field. Everybody can work hard while they're at the field. Everybody can behave and eat right when they're at the field. Everyone can show up to meetings and all that when they're at the field. It's when you're not at the field, what you're eating, where you're going, who you're hanging around, when you're getting your work in. If you're more worried about girls or work, that's the biggest difference to me when it comes to preparing and moving up the ranks. Is it's, what are you doing in the off season? What are you doing? Are you going to, did you get drafted for $500,000 and you're spending every dollar on it on a vacation every weekend to go somewhere with some bimbo when you should be focusing on what you're doing? And, I think that it's a lot of it's just a balance. I would tell a lot of people is, like, I've got a girlfriend. We talk a lot. We're close, obviously, but she's also just as driven as I am. She's valedictorian at the University of Texas in biochemistry. Wow. She works just as hard as I do. Yeah. So finding that, and I'm not trying to make this a relationship episode, but finding that with someone is really, in my mind, the only way to go when you're doing what someone in my avenue is going to do. Because if you're gonna date some chick who has no clue what you're doing, it's not going to work.
100%, man.
Or she's going to pull you away, and then you're really fucked. So I think that it's a really, really important how guys can take, like, we went on vacation. We went to Lake Tahoe. It was cold as shit. I still found a way to throw. We both worked out every morning in the hotel that we were at, and then we went and had fun. It's not that you can't go do things, and it is really good. Any guy in professional sports will tell you, when the season's over, go somewhere, take a break, get a release, go somewhere. But it's like, go somewhere, and when you get home, you're home. Don't go somewhere, and then when you get home, you're like, man, I wish I was still in Bali. Like, once you're home, it's time to go to work. You know what I mean? And I think that, and it sounds really, and one thing that I've always told my parents and anybody around me, is like, and hear me out, this is going to sound wild, getting to the big leagues, doing what you want in your life, chasing whatever goal or dream that you have, getting there is simple, but it's not easy. So getting to the big leagues for me is the steps are very simple. Yeah. Work hard. Don't be a jackass. Do your thing. That's it. That's all it takes for me to get to the big leagues. But that's not easy. To work hard, to eat right every day, to work on what you need to work, to wake up one day and you're not really feeling it and you got to go in anyways. That stuff's not easy, but it's simple. It's not that hard. Mm-hmm. it's just all of those things that it takes to get there is really like, say you want to be an astrophysicist. That's simple. You have to go to school and you have to do the work, but it's not easy by any means. You know what I mean? So there's a lot of things in life that I think people overcomplicate when it's like, it's really, really not that complicated, but it's not easy to do it. The difference between something being complicated and something being simple is two different things. You know what I mean? So it's like, whenever you have someone, I need to turn this light on. Whenever you have someone that's like, like, oh, well, making it to the big leagues or doing this or doing that, it's like, just shut your mouth and do the work. You know what I mean? Like, it's really a pretty simple concept. It's just not going to be easy by any means. And you might get told, hey, you don't have what it takes, but at least you gave it everything you had. And most people in this facility and like that are here right now, the only reason that they don't make it would be because of a fault of their own. Yeah. They've all been blessed with something. And so I just think that, when it comes down to it, there's a ton of things that go into being great at something, whatever that is. But I think a lot of it is so mental. It's just like, you have to be able to block out certain things that aren't good for you. You have to be able to go after things that are good that you might not even want to do, and I think that it's wild.
So much of what you're saying, man, is I'm really impressed with how your cerebral approach to the game, and you're kind of nailing it in the nail on the head here with the way you're approaching it. So I'm a professional stand-up comic. I was, when you could still tour, right? But right. When the world ended and things kind of shut down and baseball had the same fate, right? Like, it was so tough mentally to take, because you put, like you said, right? To become a professional comic, it's easy, but it's the hardest thing in the world, right? Like, what to put in the work. So you put in all that work, and then everything comes to a stop, and it had nothing to do with what a ball player could do. It had nothing to do with what an entertainer could do. It's out of our hands, right? And it was really weird, because I had this moment, man, where I went from miserable and upset to all of a sudden I could kind of breathe and refocus, right? Just like, and I'm sure baseball is similar, because for me, when you become a professional comedian, your whole world, your friends are comics. You're at the comedy club every night. Even when you're taking time off, my friends are comedians. So, we just wind up talking shop. So It was kind of nice to remember that there is a world outside of my world, which is like one positive from this whole thing that I took. And I'm curious if you had any positive moments you took from such a, let's be serious, a shit year and a shit experience, right?
Right. I think, to be honest, and this, I'll have to get back to you in a couple of years and see if I still think this way, but I think, and I know it was an absolutely horrible year for a lot of people. And that's not just because you couldn't go to your favorite restaurant. I mean, I know a lot of people, their businesses closed, or, like yourself, businesses way down, different things like that. But for me, I think I turned it into probably the best year of my career so far. I learned, like I said, in that league, I learned so much things. I had Roger Clemens as a coach. I got up to 99 miles an hour, which was 3 miles an hour harder than I'd ever had. I was healthy from January 1st to December 31st. I think that I just learned, I think I came a long way last year. And I think it was because of COVID. COVID simplified everything. You couldn't go anywhere. You couldn't do anything. All you could do in my realm, in my avenue, all you could do was work on your craft. All you could do was work on your craft. You couldn't really do anything. You didn't have really.
Distractions were gone. Yeah.
There was no distractions. So for me, it really helped me to find that part of me that, picked the salmon over the burger. That part of me that picked the going to bed on time rather than going out or going and doing whatever. And I think that that's something that stuck with me a lot, because I found a part of myself that I'd never seen with the velo and with the different ways I was attacking these hitters. You know, I ended with like a 4-something ERA, and I only had like 20 innings, but I had one bad outing. Without that bad outing, I've got a sub-3 ERA at 19 against big league ready guys. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's just like, to me, it was, I just got a little taste of what it looks like to be so committed to something. And I think it was dangerous for everyone else, because I really, you know, I think it's going to cost the Blue Jays a lot of money. I think it's just going to be, I think it's going to be really good for me in the long run. Obviously, you know, I say that, you know, with very cognizant of how horrible of a year it was for a lot of people. But, and, you know, I wish that I was at 8 years on the show where I could have helped more people. But I think that it was a year, and I'm thinking a lot of people probably found that, you know, there, and in a dog eat dog way, in a really straight up way, COVID brought people out of, COVID separated the men from the boys, so to speak. It separated, and that's a term I use for anybody in any occupation, is like, it really turned out who could stay there, because it was mental. It was 100% mental.
Yeah.
Who could hold on? How long could you hold on without saying, I'm not doing this shit anymore?
Yeah.
How long could you hold on to those different things that you had planned, or those trips that you had, or that money that you had that you no longer have, you know, like those kind of things, you know, it's how long mental, it really separated the mentally strong people from the not so mentally strong people. And maybe the people that weren't so mentally strong are now stronger because of it.
Right.
Because, you know, I think in a lot of ways it could have been a positive year for a lot of people, as long as, you know, the financial part of it is, there's no positive in that. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
you know, for people that went bankrupt, or people that had a small business that they just opened in January and it got shut down in March, I wouldn't wish that on my worst enemy. You know what I mean? But I think that, you know, there was a lot of things that it could, you know, and a lot of people got a lot of family time. You know, you couldn't go anywhere, you couldn't fly anywhere, you know, so I think and I'm sure there was just as many divorces too. I don't know, but you know, I think that it was a really good year for me, and just kind of, you know, looking back on it, you know, at the end of last year, kind of looking back at that summer that I had and things like that. Obviously, I wished I was at the alternate site. I, you know, was bummed to not be there, but I really didn't skip a beat, you know, because I knew that I was going to get my work in. Where years prior, I might have been like, well, I didn't make it, you know, well, I guess I'll just go to Chick-fil-A and, you know, I'll just go hang out with my girlfriend and I'll throw
But
twice
that's
a
building
week.
that mental toughness again you were
Right.
talking about, just the
Right.
experience, right? Of how to handle an
Right.
obstacle like that.
Right. And I think that, you know, I was kind of in the same scenario for big league camp. I got told I was coming to big league camp like 10 days before it started, or like 2 weeks before it started. And I was fully prepared mentally. I had been, my agent, some people from the Blue Jays had been telling me, hey, 50-50 shot. And in my mind, it was 100-0. I was ready to be at home. I was ready to work. I was ready to prove everyone wrong. So that way, when I got that call, I was like, all right, well, cool. You know, but if you're looking the other way, and you just get so, and that's another thing that the Jays are really adamant on, that I've really been high on for a couple years now too, is like, and this is in life, you know, you can't, and I tell my girlfriend this all the time because she's a woman and she's emotional. Imagine that. You can't get too high or too low. You know what I mean? And so if I'm sitting there like, hey, you might go to big league camp, you might not. And I'm like just bugging out all the time about going to big league camp. And then when it doesn't happen, I'm depressed for like 3 days. And then something else happens and I'm super happy. You know, it's like it's the same way in a super long seat. We play the longest season in sports, and I start every fifth day. Every fifth day I've got another one. So it's like after I throw that last pitch in my outing, my mind goes immediately to the 5th day, the next start. I'm already preparing for that next start. But if I threw a perfect game, or if I didn't make it out of the first inning, that next start doesn't matter. That what I did in this start doesn't matter in the next one. So if I threw 3 perfect games in a row, the 4th one, they're not going to start me out in the 2nd inning with a no-hitter already going. Like nobody gives a shit what you did.
Yeah.
So, I think that one of the things that I've really always tried to work on, and this is in life and your relationships and my sport, anything else, is like just kind of taking everything in stride and never really getting too high or too low, because it's exhausting, and it doesn't have, there's no longevity in that. Like once you get to the playoffs, say, you can be amped, but after the playoffs end, you're going to be fatigued. You're going to be absolutely exhausted because you've been so mentally stimulated for the last 3-4 weeks. Whereas in the season, you can't afford to be that way, because you're never gonna, you're gonna have, say, these highs you have, the lows are gonna match it. Every action has an equal and opposite one. So the closer you can stay to that middle line, I think the better off you are.
That's such a great approach, because you're nailing it you're nailing it here, especially like if you kind of touched on this earlier on, right? Where like if you walk a guy and you're just going to exert a bunch of mental energy about that, like what good is that in the middle of June? Like,
yeah. It's like if I walk a guy, me standing on the mound and pissed off and all that kind of stuff, first of all, it doesn't correct what I was doing wrong.
Right.
And second of all, it doesn't do anything but probably start the next guy out with ball 1. And then that makes it so it's a snowball effect. And I think that is one of the keys to pitching, is not letting things snowball, because you're going to throw bad pitches. You're going to give up homers. You're going to have bad outings. It's that keeping that snowball on the hill, so to speak, because if you let that thing go, that snowball just keeps getting bigger and bigger. And if you obviously have the talent to be there, you wouldn't be there. So then you're just mentally murdering yourself. And I think that, and it's the same thing for hitters, same thing for someone who works at a desk. It's like just keeping that slow and steady pace, just every day is a new day, and I think that it's another one. That's a simple concept, but it's not easy as humans.
Yeah.
We're emotional as humans. And I think that, if I threw a perfect game on my debut, would I be doing cartwheels on the field? Of course. But
of course.
I might even be doing cartwheels the next day.
Yeah.
But then I've still got my next start in 5 days. They're not going to push my start back a week so I can go to Vegas. But I still have a start in 5 days, and I'm starting from 0. Pitch 1, first inning. That doesn't matter what I did. So, and it's not to say that you can never celebrate things, or that you shouldn't be sad when negative things happen in your life and stuff like that. But it's bouncing back from those things quickly and getting back to that middle line and getting back to even keel is a lot more longevity in that.
Man, I'm just loving like the mental aspect of this whole talk, buddy. Like, you really have put a lot of thought into how to get the most out of yourself at any given moment, And
Right.
I think that that's something that definitely separates the guys who makes it and the guys who don't, which is something we've kind of been touching on all along here.
Right.
I know you put aside an hour for us here, and I've got a bunch of listener questions to get to before we let you go.
What time is it? Go for it.
Go for it. You're cool with sticking around for another few minutes? Okay.
Yeah,
okay.
Go ahead.
Awesome. So this first one is from Isaac in Edmonton. He says, Adam, congrats on going to big league camp. You've been compared to Justin Verlander, which is no low praise. Do you compare yourself to and/or craft your game after anyone else?
So it's funny. That was actually, we were just talking about being even keel. That was one of the first times that was kind of around the draft. And that was the first time I'd ever been actually compared to him. And he was actually, for a long time, and I still do, someone who I compare myself to.
Yeah.
And it was really cool to see, my name and his name next to each other on TV, you know what I mean? And I think that he's someone who obviously being in Houston, I got to see, I was at some of the World Series games. I was at the ALDS games. Like I got to see him throw, and I don't really know a ton about him, like his mental side of the game and stuff, but all of, his pitch repertoire, his velo, his longevity into games, his dominance, all of that would be something that any pitcher would dream of. And I think it's I think it's a realistic comparison. Is we're both 6'5", 6'6", both throw hard, but not a million miles an hour.
Yeah.
Both are pitchers, and there's throwers and there's pitchers. And to be honest, that's a funny question, because I don't think I really compare myself to anyone but him. If I were to compare myself to someone, it would be him. I like watching Cole pitch, but I don't pitch like Cole pitches. I like watching Scherzer throw. He's a little different than the way I am. I really like Strasburg. There's a couple guys who are, big time arms, but I think that, I just enjoy watching guys pitch, and I don't really compare myself to other guys usually, because I think that everybody's different. But if there is anyone in the past, then it has been Verlander.
That's great, man. So this next question is from David in Kitchener, Ontario. So that's a couple hours below Toronto. He says, so I know you and Jordan Groshans are good buds and go way back. I know he's a big golfer, and I know that you golf. Are you better than Groshans at golfing?
No, I'm not. Jordan, so I just started playing like pretty much right during COVID, when COVID started and golf courses were like the only thing still open.
Right.
I never got to hang out with him because he was playing golf all the time. And he's like, well, dude, why don't you start golfing? And I was like, all right, fine. So I finally started golfing. He's been golfing for like 2 or 3 years now. Pretty much since he got drafted, he's been golfing. He's probably, on average, he's like a low 80s, mid 80s golfer.
Yeah.
And I'm like a low 90s, sometimes, maybe 89.
For just picking the game up, that's pretty darn good.
Yeah, I mean, that's what I keep getting told. I guess, like, I really, I don't really focus on it a ton, obviously, because I got other things going on.
Right.
But I do think that I do really enjoy playing it. It's a good time. It's when it's beautiful weather, you can't beat it. And I think that it's also really good rotational as far as flexibility in my, for my other sport that I actually get paid to play.
Yeah.
And then, I really enjoy playing it. It's relaxing, and, I do need to get better, because when I get to the big leagues, apparently there's some pretty good golfers up there. So
yeah,
hopefully,
it's funny
when
we were talking to Jordan, this was like 6 weeks ago. He talked to us for a full hour, and he had about 7 minutes to get to his tee time. Like, he literally was like, all right, I gotta go. Like, I'm out of here. So
yeah,
and it's
that
funny.
Sounds about right.
There's quite a few guys in the clubhouse that are golfers, correct?
Yeah, everybody golfs.
Everybody golfs,
especially pitchers.
Yeah. Well, I know we were just literally, like, before we talked to you here, like an hour and a half ago, we were talking to Nick Algier, and he is
nasty.
Yeah.
He's a very good golfer. He's like a mid 70s golfer.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah, he's very good. I think one time in his life, he's actually broke par.
Wow.
Like 70, 71. I think 69 actually is like his best score. He's like I think he's a +1 handicap.
He didn't even bring that up. He literally mentioned golf in passing. He talked hockey with us for like 30 minutes.
Yeah. He's a hockey guy, but normally when you're really good at something, he's probably not going to, then that's not Nick. Nick would be like, hey, I'm really good
he's
at golf.
A humble guy.
But,
you could tell.
Him and we throw together most days, which is funny you bring him up. But, that's funny that you say that, because he's probably the best golfer we have.
Nice.
Yeah.
All right. Well, next time we bring him on, we'll have to get him to get into that a bit then. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. This next question is from Jenna in Toronto. She says, hey, Adam, excited to hear you're on the walk-off. Being you're from Texas, are you a big barbecue fan? What's your favorite Texas meal?
Oh man. I like barbecue, but I wouldn't say that I crave barbecue.
Right.
Favorite Texas meal takes the cake is Tex-Mex. Um, anything Mexican food from Texas, I am all over it. Normally it's not as healthy, so I have to be careful. But and that's why I hate coming to Florida, because there's no Tex-Mex out here. And there's no Tex-Mex literally just means Texas Mexican.
Yeah.
But we have some really good Mexican food. And obviously I'm sure there's not much to pick from in Toronto either. But I think that the food in Texas is great, but as far as barbecue goes, I like it, but I'm not like a huge barbecue guy.